Hey guys, what's up? Gavin here. I'm very excited to announce that today is the release of my third EP in this campaign of 6 EPs in a row, 6 Fridays in a row. If you haven't, go check out the first two. You have Lost Forest. You have Unknown Secret. And this week we have Bleeding Light Energy. That is the alias for the project. And the album name is A Seeker's Soul Smiles Sideways. Go take a listen to it. I'll have some links in the description, and then come back to this video and we're going to dig in a bit to what all those elements are, why I decided to make a project like this in the first place. The bulk of the work of this project was done 6 years ago. I was 19, it was January of 2018. And I want to give you a little bit of a reference point for where I was at mentally with music that made me want to make something like this. To get you in that frame of mind, I'd like to ask you, what do all of these genres have in common? Technical death metal, emo, skate punk, visual K. The answer is that they all use different guitar parts in the left and right channel. At least a lot of the bands that have 2 guitar players do. I realized at some point, a very long time ago, that all of these different bands I was enjoying that were under different genre flags and had different sounds all utilized cool harmony and cool interplay between 2 different guitars and a bass. If I want, I can listen to a song I've heard 100 times and just focus on the left guitar part and probably find something in it that I didn't notice before. I can just listen to the right guitar, I can just listen to the bass. They all have something to say, and yet they all work together. I had written a bunch of music recently in the fall of 2017. I wrote this whole 50-minute technical emo album that used 2 clean guitars and a bass, and no part repeated ever. It was just tons and tons of writing. And I really loved the sounds that I was getting, but I wanted to try something that felt new to me, that felt different, like it hadn't been done. And I thought, what if we kept that format of something in this ear and something in this ear? That's usually 2 different guitars, but what if I created the instruments that were used in each of those channels? The drums are simply samples of a kick, snare, ride, and hi-hat that I have arranged here in the timeline to program. Hi-hat and ride sample are from my first drum sample library. It's simple enough. You take a cheap drum kit, put a mic in front of it, hit everything a million times, cut up all those samples. Now you have stuff to use that's your own. The kicks and snares, however, aren't real kicks and snares. They're really just the sound of me hitting objects and recording it with a microphone and then adding some processing. So if we listen here to the kick sample without processing, EQ, wave shaping, and it comes together. And my snares were created from a layer of 2 samples. We have something that sounds like a piece of paper maybe being hit quite hard. This is it without EQ and transient shaping. And we add EQ and transient shaping. And we layer that with this sound that I think sounds like pencils clicking, with some EQ, slight bit of stereo spread and reverb. Tighten up the length of all of these, and it sounds a little more like this. And those are the drums I used for the whole project. You can see later here that I actually attempted to use cymbal samples, but I didn't like the sound of it, so I muted it in the end. The next major element you can hear is the bass, which sounds like this without processing. Our processing really is just multiband compression, EQ, and a bit of wave shaping to give it some more power. The real secret here is that we send that signal to a new channel where just the high end is distorted and made a bit stereo, which sounds like this. Adds so much life to it without distorting and ruining the sanctity of those low notes in the DI signal. Sounds like this now. Bass was kind of my entry point into more shred style playing. I had heard a lot of power metal bands with crazy bass playing, started learning a ton of those songs, like dozens of them. I joined a local metal band playing bass. When you learn a lot of songs on bass, you become a lot more aware of the movement of the bass note, which really is how the chords move within any kind of riff or section. So I think it made me a lot better songwriter, and at this point I had just been exposed to so much music through bass that I had a lot of confidence for writing cool bass lines. The next major element is what we hear in one of the channels, which is really the sound of a voice making random notes and then being hard tuned to match the key of the song with a bunch of delay and distortion and reverb on it. It's just 6 or 7 takes of random sounds into a mic with my voice, like this. With the auto-tune, with the delay on it, it sounds something like this. Sometimes I just decided to chop it up or fade it in. And then we add distortion, layers of EQ, reverb, and delay to it. And that becomes one of the quote-unquote guitars in one of the channels. The other guitar element that's always in the opposite channel of that one is literally just an acoustic guitar sampling the open strings of it with some processing. So you can hear that here, each open string of this acoustic guitar. The recordings sound kind of low quality. There's like stuff going on in the background, and that's because I want noise and character to these things. I don't want them just to sound like a clean voice or a clean guitar. I want them to sound like otherworldly instruments, so I'm letting all of that other dirt kind of bleed in. We take those 6 samples, and before we process them, we're going to send them to a different channel where we're going to use this spectral bin shift plugin, which changes the sounds to sound like this. So we're adding in that texture as a layer to this sample. And then the original sample is mainly being processed by this Melda production plugin, which is like a wave shaper distortion type of thing. With it on, sounds like this. You can hear it that we're distorting it so much now that we really get the character of what makes each one of these hits unique, which is what we want. We want these to all sound a bit different. And so here we are in Contact, which is simply a sampler plugin. And what it's letting us do is use those 6 samples and spread them across the entire keyboard. The way that these are spread out means that we're able to get a different sample triggered from the same note depending on the velocity of it. So for example, at velocity 0, a note sounds like this. Change the velocity, change it again. The way that I've programmed all these melodies in the MIDI for this channel includes lots of changes of velocity, basically making sure it can trigger a different type of sample so that it doesn't all sound exactly the same. If we listen to one of these parts without any processing on the channel strip, this is what it sounds like. Then we're going to add distortion, isotope trash, which is basically making it louder with wave shaping, EQ, brightening it up, reverb, limiting, more wave shaping, more EQ, and some delay, but that's not really used. It's used for automation later. I think this is really just one of the coolest instruments in the whole project. It has such a unique sound to it. Both this instrument and the weird auto-tune vocal instrument in separate channels the whole time, but they're both being sent to the same type of reverb, which is actually being flipped. When you're hearing this instrument in one ear, you're hearing the reverb of it in the other ear. When you're hearing this instrument in this ear, you're hearing the reverb of it in the other ear. So it just helps it be a little less completely this side, completely this side, even if it's a subtle effect. In revisiting this project this year to do some tweaks, I was surprised to find that there was a pad going throughout the entire thing. Like on Lost Forest, the first EP of this campaign, it's one of those things that just adds in nice support and texture. You notice it when it's gone, and you don't really notice it when it's there. The next element that's constantly going is quite unconventional as well. It's an acoustic guitar, an electric acoustic, so we're hearing that signal from the cord straight into my audio interface, and then applying a ton of processing on it to make it almost more sound like a synth. Here's what it sounds like raw, direct. At first, just some basic EQ multiband compression. Brightens it up and controls it a bit. Then this flanger. Then we have guitar rig, which is mixing a signal of it an octave down. Adds a lot of cool stereo image to it, some distortion, reverb and EQ, and again, multiband compression and limiting to control it. You're seeing me use a similar trick here again. I'm going to send this channel signal to another channel where it will be processed to add a sort of layer texturally to it. So I'm sending it to this bus where we have a bit crusher, EQ, and then this I'm just using to delay it so it actually has some phase discrepancy with the original signal, so it almost sounds thicker. And there's that heavily bit crush signal you can hear being added, adds a lot of fuzz and hiss to it, and this is what it sounds like finished. So that's all of the instruments. And then the big other crazy twist on the project is that there are these falsetto triple or quad tracked vocals happening over everything.
Canyons of time, grasp them closed if I don't wanna see.
I'm using this technique of tracking it 4 times over. It just helps the sound be a little more thick, and if you aren't quite doing the best in one take, they all even each other out. This was also a time in my life where I had been singing a lot, not with falsetto voice, but with normal voice for a couple years, and I'd done some projects with my normal voice, but wanted something that felt different. I'd never done something with falsetto vocals. This was a very impulsive thing, and of course, in retrospect, I wish I did the vocals a bit better. It really just depends how I wake up in the morning. Some days I go, hey, that's really cool, I love those vocals. And some days I go, yeah, you could have done a bit better. Great band with falsetto vocals from a male, by the way, is Mew from Denmark. And basically, all those things come together to give you the final sound of bleeding light energy. To me, it's the format, it's the spirit, it's the ethos of rock music, but played with different instruments. If you're sitting on any old projects, just try to wrap them up and finish them. I did an insane amount of tiny mixing tweaks here at the end to get it to my satisfaction, but at a certain point you have to just move on and realize that instead of trying to redo what you did originally, you need to make new stuff, and that's what I would really like to do. I don't want all these old projects weighing me down anymore. I want to look forward to new projects and a lifetime of new music.